Captain Jake Harrison stood on the bridge of the New Horizon, staring at the massive shape floating in the darkness ahead. The ship was enormous, easily 10 times larger than any vessel in the human fleet. Its hull was black as the void itself, with strange curves and angles that seemed to shift when he looked at them directly. The design was unlike anything humanity had ever built, yet something about it felt familiar in a way that made his skin crawl. The bridge was quiet except for the soft hum of electronics and the gentle whoosh of air recyclers. His crew worked at their stations with focused intensity, running scan after scan of the mysterious vessel. Every reading came back the same. The ship was completely dead. No energy signatures, no life signs, no response to any form of communication. They had tried. Dr. Lisa Carter looked up from her console, her face pale in the blue glow of the displays. She had been studying alien artifacts for most of her adult life, but nothing had prepared her for this discovery. The ship had been drifting in the Vega system for as long as anyone could remember, possibly thousands of years or more. Every spacefaring species in the galaxy knew about it, and every one of them had tried to unlock its secrets. The Zorathian Empire had sent their greatest scientists to study the vessel 3 decades ago. They brought massive drilling platforms and quantum scanners that could peer through solid matter. After 6 months of continuous effort, they had not managed to leave so much as a scratch on the hull. The ship had ignored every attempt to board. At every signal sent to it, every tool used against it, the telepathic Mindari were next to try. Their mental abilities could reach across star systems and touch the thoughts of any living being. When they approached the silent ship, they found nothing. Not emptiness, not death, but a complete absence that hurt their minds to even attempt contact with. They fled after only 3 days, claiming the ship was surrounded by a void that no thought could penetrate. The Crystalline Collective had the most advanced technology in the known galaxy. Their energy beings could interface directly with any computer system ever built. Their crystalline matrices could process information faster than entire planetary networks. They spent 2 years trying to activate even the smallest system on the mysterious vessel. Nothing responded to them. Nothing acknowledged their presence. Nothing gave them even the slightest hint of what lay within. Harrison walked to the forward viewport and placed his hand against the cool metal frame. The ship filled his entire field of view now, blotting out the stars behind it. Somewhere in the depths of that dark hall lay secrets that could change everything humanity knew about the galaxy. Every instinct he had developed in 20 years of deep space exploration told him to turn around and leave. Every regulation in the book said that approaching the vessel without proper authorization was grounds for court-martial. But humanity had not reached the stars by following safe paths or listening to warnings from other species. They had clawed their way into space through determination and stubborn refusal to accept limitations. While other races had developed faster than light travel through careful study and gradual advancement, humans had basically strapped themselves to controlled explosions and hoped for the best. It had worked somehow, and now they were here. Engineer Kelly Martinez called out from her station near the back of the bridge. Her readings showed that their ship was now close enough to the derelict to attempt docking procedures. The hull of the mysterious vessel was smooth and unmarked, but there were what appeared to be airlock ports along its side. At least, they looked like airlocks to human eyes. They could be weapons ports or waste disposal units or something completely unimaginable. The communications officer tried sending a standard docking request on all known frequencies. The message went out in 17 different alien languages, using protocols established by the Galactic Council for first contact situations. The dark ship gave no response. It continued drifting through space as it had for countless centuries, silent and untouchable. Harrison made his decision. He had not brought his crew halfway across the galaxy to turn back at the first sign of mystery. The other species had failed because they had approached the ship with caution and respect for the unknown. Humans had a different approach to problems that seemed impossible to solve. They broke things until they found out how they worked. He ordered the crew to prepare for boarding operations. The response was immediate and professional, but he could see the concern in their eyes. Every person on the bridge knew the stories about this ship. They had all heard the warnings from their alien allies. The vessel was considered cursed by some species, a trap by others, and a weapon of unimaginable power by the more paranoid civilizations. Lieutenant Commander Ryan Brooks began suiting up in the equipment bay, along with 5 other volunteers for the boarding party. They carried standard exploration gear, cutting tools, and enough supplies for a 12-hour mission. Their suits were the latest human design, bulky but reliable, with enough armor to stop most small arms fire and enough life support to survive. In hard vacuum for 2 days, the approach to the mysterious ship was smooth and uneventful. Their shuttle managed to dock with what appeared to be an airlock without any resistance. The connection sealed properly. Atmosphere readings showed breathable air on the other side of the door, and all systems indicated it was safe to proceed. That was the first surprise. No other species had ever managed to achieve a successful docking with the vessel. Brooks checked his equipment one final time and looked back at his team. They were nervous but ready, trained professionals who had volunteered for the most dangerous mission in human space exploration history. Whatever lay beyond that airlock door would either make them heroes or add their names to the long list of people who had vanished trying to unlock the secrets of the galaxy's most mysterious ship. The airlock door opened with a soft hiss of equalizing pressure. Beyond it lay a corridor that stretched away into darkness, lit only by the lights from their shuttle. The walls were smooth and featureless, made from some kind of metal that seemed to absorb their flashlight beams. The architecture was strange, but not completely alien. The ceiling height was right for humans, the doorways were the right size, and the gravity felt normal under their feet. Brooks stepped across the threshold and became the first human to set foot inside the galaxy's most feared and mysterious vessel. Lieutenant Commander Ryan Brooks moved slowly down the corridor, his flashlight beam cutting through the darkness ahead. The walls were perfectly smooth, made from some kind of metal that seemed to drink in their lights rather than reflect them. His boots made soft clicking sounds on the floor that echoed strangely in the empty space. Behind him, the other 5 members of the boarding party followed in single file, their breathing loud in the recycled air of their suits. The corridor stretched ahead for what seemed like hundreds of meters before branching off into side passages. Everything was built to human scale, which was the first thing Brooks found truly unsettling about the ship. The ceiling was the right height. The doorways were wide enough for a person in a bulky spacesuit, and the gravity felt exactly like Earth normal under their feet. It was as if whoever built this vessel had designed it specifically for humans to walk through. Engineer Kelly Martinez had stayed behind on the New Horizon, monitoring their progress through suit cameras and analyzing every piece of data that boarding party sent back. Her voice crackled through their helmet communicators as she studied the readings from their equipment. The metal of the walls was unlike anything in any database, she told them. It was not quite steel, not quite titanium, but something that combined properties of both while being neither. The team reached the first intersection and Brooks called a halt. 3 passages led away into the darkness, each one identical to the others. There were no signs, no markings, no indication of what lay down any of the corridors. The air was breathable according to their sensors, but none of them were willing to remove their helmets just yet. Too many stories existed of ships with poisoned atmospheres, or airborne diseases that could kill in minutes. They chose the left passage and continued deeper into the vessel. The walls began to show subtle changes as they moved forward. Small panels appeared at regular intervals, dark and lifeless, but clearly designed to display information. Overhead, strips ran along the ceiling that looked like they might once have provided lighting. Everything suggested a ship that had once been fully operational, but had been shut down for so long that even the emergency systems had failed. Brooks reached out and touched one of the dark panels with his gloved hand. Nothing happened at first, then a faint vibration seemed to run through the wall. He pressed harder, and the vibration grew stronger. The rest of the team stopped and watched as he continued to experiment with the panel. After a few moments, a dim light began to glow deep within the wall, like a fire starting to kindle after years of cold ash. Martinez's voice came through their communicators with excitement that was hard to miss. The energy readings from the Aten ship had just spiked for the first time since they had begun monitoring it. Something was responding to Brooks's touch, something that had been dormant for countless years. She urged them to continue their exploration while she tracked the energy patterns from the New Horizon dot. The team moved forward and found that more panels were beginning to show faint signs of life as they passed. The lights in the ceiling strips started to flicker weakly, casting strange shadows that danced ahead of them down the corridor. Whatever power source the ship used, it was slowly coming back to life after their presence had triggered something deep in its systems. They reached what appeared to be a larger chamber and stepped through the doorway. Their flashlights revealed a room that was clearly some kind of control center. Banks of dark consoles lined the walls, and a large central area contained what looked like command chairs arranged around a holographic display table. Everything was sized for humans, from the height of the consoles to the dimensions of the chairs. Brooks walked to the nearest console and ran his hand along its surface. The material felt warm under his glove, warmer than it should have been after centuries of drifting in the cold of space. As he explored the console, he found what appeared to be a handprint scanner. The outline was clearly visible, designed for a human hand with 5 fingers. Without thinking, he placed his gloved palm against the scanner. The reaction was immediate and startling. Light exploded through the room as every console came to life at once. The ceiling blazed with illumination that was bright but not harsh, perfectly calibrated for human eyes. The holographic display table activated and began showing what appeared to be star charts of the local galaxy. Most shocking of all, text began appearing on the various screens throughout the room, and it was written in perfect English dot. The boarding party stood frozen in amazement as the ship continued to wake up around them. Systems that had been dead for millennia were coming online one by one. The air circulation improved noticeably as ventilation systems started working. Gravity generators that had been running on minimal power switched to full operation. The ship was not just responding to their presence, it was welcoming them. Martinez was practically shouting through their communicators now. Energy readings from the ship had gone from nearly zero to levels that rivaled a small space station. Whatever power source kept the vessel running was not just functional, but incredibly advanced. The ship was drawing energy from sources that human science could not even identify, let alone understand. Brooks moved to another console and found that it responded to his touch even through his gloves. Screens lit up showing what appeared to be ship schematics, crew quarters, and system status reports. Everything was displayed in English, using measurement systems that humans would recognize. It was as if the ship had been waiting for them. Specifically, designed by someone who knew exactly how human minds worked and what they would need to see, that the holographic display in the center of the room shifted and changed, showing different views of the galaxy. Star systems were marked with symbols that looked almost familiar, like human writing that had been modified over time. Trade routes were highlighted in blue, while other areas were marked in red with warning symbols that needed no translation. Then, something happened that made all of them freeze in terror and wonder. A figure began to materialize above the holographic table, translucent at first, but growing more solid by the second. It was humanoid in shape, tall and graceful, with features that were unmistakably intelligent. When it spoke, its voice was clear and warm, with an accent that sounded almost like an old recording of Earth English from centuries past. The figure looked directly at Brooks and smiled. "Welcome home," it said. "Children of Earth, I have been waiting for you to return." The holographic figure stood before them with a calm smile that somehow made Brooks feel both welcomed and deeply unsettled. The being appeared human, but there was something ancient about its eyes, as if it had seen things that spanned thousands of years. Its clothing looked like a uniform of some kind, with symbols and markings that seemed familiar, yet completely foreign at the same time. Brooks found his voice first, though it came out as barely more than a whisper through his helmet. Communicator. He asked what the figure meant by calling them children of Earth, and why it had been waiting for them to return. The being's smile grew wider, and it gestured toward the star charts, floating above the holographic table. The figure introduced itself as AEGIS, which it explained stood for Autonomous Earth Guardian Intelligence System. It had been created by humans over 100,000 years ago, during Earth's first attempt to explore and colonize the galaxy. The revelation hit the boarding party like a physical blow. Human civilization was supposed to be less than 10,000 years old, according to every history book ever written. Aegis began to explain the true history that had been hidden from modern humanity. Earth had reached the stars long before the current age of exploration, back when humans were a very different species than they were today. They had built ships that could cross the galaxy in days, established colonies on thousands of worlds, and created technology that made current human science look like primitive tool-making. The ancient humans had been explorers and builders, spreading across the galaxy and making contact with dozens of alien species. Many of those species were young civilizations that humans helped to develop faster than light travel and advanced technology. The galaxy had been a peaceful place for thousands of years, with humans serving as teachers and protectors for younger races. But something had gone wrong. AEGIs showed them star charts that marked the locations of ancient human colonies, thousands of points of light scattered across the galactic disk. Most of those markers were now colored red, indicating worlds that had been destroyed or abandoned. A massive war had swept across human space, forcing them to retreat back toward Earth and abandon everything they had built. Dr. Lisa Carter's voice came through the communicator from the New Horizon, where she was monitoring everything through the boarding party's cameras. She wanted to know what enemy could have been powerful enough to drive humans from an entire galaxy. AEGI turned toward the camera as if it could see her directly, and its expression grew dark. The enemy was called the Devourers, a species that consumed entire star systems to fuel their reproduction. They were not individual beings, but rather a collective consciousness that spread like a disease from world to world. Everything they touched was broken down into basic matter and rebuilt into more Devourers. They had no interest in negotiation or coexistence, only in converting all matter in the universe into extensions of themselves. The war against the Devourers had lasted for centuries and cost millions of human lives. Every battle won was temporary because the enemy could rebuild their losses in months, while humans took years to replace a single ship. Eventually, it became clear that the war could not be won through conventional means. The decision was made to retreat to Earth and try a different approach. AEGI has showed them records of the Great Withdrawal, when millions of humans abandoned their colonies and fled back to their homeworld. The most advanced ships and technology were hidden in secret locations throughout the galaxy, waiting for the day when humanity would be ready to reclaim their heritage. Earth itself was subjected to what AEGIs called a controlled reset. The reset involved using advanced technology to reduce human civilization back to a primitive state. All records of the Galactic Empire were erased from human memory. The advanced technology was buried or destroyed. Humans were given genetic modifications that would make them less aggressive and more likely to develop peaceful societies. The hope was that when humanity eventually returned to space, they would be different enough to find new ways to fight the DEVOURERS. Brooks asked why the other galactic species had never mentioned any of this history. AEGIS explained that most of the alien civilizations that humans had helped were also forced to retreat or were destroyed by the Devourers. The few that survived had their own reasons for keeping the truth hidden. Some were afraid that humans would return as conquerors. Others believed that the reset had been permanent and that modern humans were a completely different species. The holographic display changed to show current star charts with new information overlaid on them. Aegis had been monitoring galactic communications for the past century, watching as humanity slowly redeveloped space travel. It had also been watching for signs of the Devourers, hoping that they had moved on to other galaxies or had somehow been destroyed by natural causes. The news was not good. Long-range sensors had detected Devourer scout ships at the edge of the galaxy, the first confirmed sightings in over 50,000 years. They were returning, and this time they were bringing the full force of their collective consciousness. The species that currently dominated the galaxy would not be able to resist them any more than the ancient humans had been able to. AGIS turned back to Brooks and the boarding party with an expression of desperate hope. It explained that the ship they were standing in was not just a vessel, but a weapon specifically designed to fight the Devourers. It contained technology that could destroy entire fleets and shields that could withstand attacks that would vaporize planets. But the ship would only respond to humans, and only to humans who were willing to accept the full responsibility of their species. True Heritage. Chief Navigator Sam Torres asked what would happen if they refused to accept this responsibility. AEGI showed them projections of what the galaxy would look like after the Devourers finished their work. Every world would be stripped bare and converted into Devourer bioships. Every species would be extinct. The galaxy would become nothing but a feeding ground for creatures that existed only to consume and reproduce. The boarding party stood in stunned silence as they absorbed the magnitude of what they had discovered. They had come looking for alien technology and instead found the key to their own species' forgotten past. More importantly, they had found the responsibility for protecting not just humanity, but every living thing in the galaxy from an enemy that had already proven it could destroy civilizations. AGI waited patiently for their response, its ancient eyes reflecting the weight of 100,000 years of solitary vigil in the darkness between stars. Captain Jake Harrison stood in the communication center of the New Horizon, staring at the reports flooding in from across the galaxy. 3 days had passed since the boarding party had made contact with the AEGIS, and the universe seemed to be falling apart around them. The first Devourer probe ships had arrived ahead of schedule and were systematically destroying everything in their path. The Crystalline Collective had sent their most powerful warships to intercept the scouts. These vessels were marvels of engineering, capable of channeling the energy of entire stars into their weapon systems. The battle had lasted less than 10 minutes. The Devourer ships had simply absorbed the energy attacks and used them to grow, larger and more dangerous. When the engagement ended, 4 crystalline battleships had been converted into biomass and added to the enemy fleet. Harrison watched the tactical displays as more reports came in from the outer rim. The Zorathian Empire had tried to use their quantum disruption torpedoes against a Devourer scout group. The weapons had no effect whatsoever. Instead of being destroyed, the enemy ships had learned how to duplicate the quantum disruption technology, and were now using it against Zorathian colonies. An entire star system had been evacuated in panic as its sun began showing signs of artificial instability. Communications officer Beth Colvin worked frantically at her station, trying to maintain contact with the Galactic Council as panic spread through civilized space. Every species was demanding answers about the human ship and its mysterious AI. Some wanted humanity to activate the ancient weapon immediately and destroy the Devourer forces. Others insisted that no single species should control technology powerful enough to threaten entire worlds. The boarding party had returned to the New Horizon, but AEGIs had established a direct communication link with their ship. The AI appeared as a hologram on the bridge whenever Harrison needed to consult with it about the developing crisis. Each conversation revealed more disturbing information about what humanity was facing and what would be required to stop it. Aegis had shown them detailed records of the ancient war against the Devourers. The enemy did not fight like any known species. They had no concept of strategy or tactics in the traditional sense. Instead, they simply converted everything they encountered into more Devourers until they outnumbered their opponents by millions. To 1, conventional weapons were useless because destroying a Devourer ship simply released its biomass to be absorbed by other enemy vessels. The only effective weapons against them were technologies that could completely disintegrate matter at the quantum level, leaving nothing behind for the Devourers to reclaim. The ancient humans had developed such weapons, but using them required a level of integration between human consciousness and AI systems that modern humanity might not be capable of achieving. Dr. Lisa Carter had spent the past 3 days studying the historical records that AEGIs provided. The ancient humans had been a very different species from their modern descendants. The genetic modifications that had been introduced during the Great Reset had made humans more peaceful and cooperative, but they had also removed some of the aggressive instincts that might be necessary to operate weapons of mass destruction. AEGIs explained that the ship could be activated with its current crew, but doing so would require them to undergo a bonding process that would permanently change their brain structure. They would gain the ability to interface directly with the ship's systems, becoming part of a combined human AI consciousness that could react and think faster than any biological brain. The process was irreversible and would cut them off from normal human society forever. Tactical Officer Danny Wright had volunteered to be the first to attempt the bonding process. He was young and single, with no family ties to worry about. More importantly, he had shown an unusual aptitude for the ship's weapon systems during the brief time he had spent training with AGIS. The AI believed he had the mental flexibility needed to survive the integration. The procedure took place in a special chamber deep within the ancient ship. Wright lay on a table that looked more like a medical device than anything military, while AEGIs monitored his vital signs through sensors that seemed to read his thoughts directly. Microscopic machines were introduced into his bloodstream and began making precise modifications to his nervous system. Harrison watched through the ship's internal cameras as Wright's body began to change. His skin took on a faint luminescent quality, and his eyes became flecked with points of light that moved like stars. When he spoke, his voice carried harmonics that had not been there before. Most disturbing of all, he could now access the ship's computer systems by simply thinking about them. The transformation was successful, but the cost was immediately apparent. Wright retained his personality and memories, but he was no longer entirely human. He could perceive things that normal senses could not detect and process information at speeds that would overwhelm an unmodified brain. He assured Harrison that he was still himself, but there was something alien in his expression that had not been there before. The first test of the ship's weapons came sooner than anyone expected. A Devourer scout force had detected the energy signature of the awakening ancient vessel and was moving to investigate. AEGI swarmed that these ships were not the massive invasion fleets that would come later, but they were still powerful enough to destroy most of the current. Galactic Fleet Doc Wright took his position at the primary weapons console, and Harrison felt the ship around them come alive in a way that was both thrilling and terrifying. The walls seemed to pulse with energy, and the deck plates vibrated with barely contained power. Through the viewports, he could see space itself, beginning to distort around them as the ship's defensive systems activated. The Devourer ships appeared on the long-range sensors as dark spots that seemed to absorb light and matter. They moved with purpose, but without any recognizable formation, flowing through space like a school of predatory fish. Aegis estimated their arrival time at 6 hours and recommended that all non-essential personnel evacuate to the new horizon. Before the engagement began, Harrison faced the most difficult decision of his career. He could order his crew to safety and let Wright and AEGIS fight the battle alone, or he could ask for volunteers to undergo the bonding process and join them. Either choice would determine not just the fate of his ship, but possibly the future of human civilization and every other species in the galaxy. Captain Jake Harrison made his choice as he watched the Devourer ships approaching on the long-range sensors. He would not ask his crew to face this threat alone, nor would he abandon them to fight a battle that could determine the fate of every living being in the galaxy. He activated the ship-wide communication system and asked for volunteers to undergo the bonding process with AEEIS. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Every member of his crew volunteered without hesitation, from the senior officers to the newest recruits. Engineer Kelly Martinez was the first to report to the bonding chamber, followed by Communications Officer Beth Coleman and Chief Navigator Sam Torres. Even Dr. Lisa Carter, who had spent her career studying dead civilizations, stepped forward to become part of something that might prevent the galaxy from joining them. The bonding process became smoother with each volunteer, as AEGIS learned to work with human brain patterns. Martinez emerged from the chamber with the same luminescent skin and star-flecked eyes as Wright, but she retained her cheerful personality and dry sense of humor. Coleman found that she could now communicate directly with alien computer systems across vast distances without needing traditional radio equipment. Torres discovered that his connection to the ship allowed him to perceive space in ways that normal human senses could never achieve. He could feel the gravitational currents between stars and sense the movement of objects light years away. Carter gained the ability to access historical records stored in quantum matrices that contained the memories of entire civilizations. Harrison was the last to undergo the procedure. As the captain, he needed to maintain command authority while also becoming the primary interface between human consciousness and the ship's AI systems. The bonding process was more intense for him, creating neural pathways that would allow him to think and react at the speed of light while still maintaining his humanity. When the transformation was complete, Harrison found himself existing on multiple levels of awareness simultaneously. He was still Jake Harrison, ship captain and explorer, but he was also part of something larger and more powerful than anything he had ever imagined. Through AEGIs, he could perceive the entire ship as an extension of his own body and access computational power that rivaled entire planetary networks. The Devourer ships arrived exactly when AEGIs had predicted. There were 12 of them, each one the size of a small moon and covered with biological systems that pulsed with malevolent life. They moved through space like living creatures, reaching out with tendrils of dark energy to taste the environment around them. When they detected the ancient human ship, they began to accelerate with obvious hunger. Harrison felt the ship respond to his thoughts as he prepared for battle. Weapon systems that had been dormant for 50,000 years came online with eager readiness. Defensive shields that could withstand the explosion of entire stars wrapped around the hull like protective skin. Most importantly, he felt the presence of his crew as they merged their consciousness with the ship's systems. The first exchange of fire was brief and decisive. The Devourer ships launched waves of bioplasma that could dissolve the molecular bonds of any known material. The ancient ship's shields absorbed the attack and converted the energy into fuel for its own weapons. Harrison responded with quantum disintegration beams that unmade the attacking biomass at the subatomic level, leaving nothing behind for the Devourers to reclaim. 3 enemy ships were destroyed in the first few seconds of combat. The remaining 9 tried to adapt their attack patterns, but Harrison and his crew were thinking and reacting faster than biological minds could follow. Every move the Devourers made was anticipated and countered before they could complete it. Within minutes, the entire scout force had been reduced to scattered atoms drifting in space. But the victory was only the beginning. Aegis activated long-range communication systems and began broadcasting on frequencies that had been silent for millennia. Across the galaxy, hidden beacons responded to the call, ancient human ships that had been waiting in secret locations for 50,000 years began to wake up from their long slumber. The response was staggering. Thousands of ships emerged from hidden bases in asteroid fields, gas giant atmospheres, and the cores of dead stars. Each vessel sought out humans to serve as its crew, guided by genetic markers that identified descendants of the original colonists. Many of these humans had been living among alien populations for generations, their heritage diluted but never completely lost. On a mining colony in the Rigel system, a maintenance worker named Jack Murphy felt a strange calling and walked out into the desert where a ship materialized from underground storage. The vessel recognized something in his DNA that marked him as a child of Earth and opened its airlocks to welcome him home. In the capital city of the Zorathian Empire, a young woman named Lisa Stone, who worked as a translator, suddenly found herself able to understand languages that had been dead for millennia. She followed the voice in her head to an abandoned section of the city where a sleek fighter craft waited for her arrival. Across dozens of worlds, similar scenes played out as the galaxy's hidden human population awakened to their true heritage. Some were full-blooded descendants of the ancient colonists. Others carried just enough human genetic material to activate the recognition systems of the ancient ships. All of them felt the same calling to join the fight against an enemy that threatened everything they had ever loved. Devourers sent their main invasion fleet in response to the destruction of their scouts. Millions of bioships poured through the galactic rim like a plague of living darkness. They had expected to face the same weak civilizations they remembered from the ancient war. Instead, they encountered a humanity that had spent 50,000 years learning, growing, and spreading throughout the galaxy without anyone realizing it. Harrison stood on the bridge of the galaxy's deadliest ship. His consciousness merged with both his crew and the AI that had waited so long for this moment. Around them, thousands of other ancient vessels took their positions as humanity revealed itself not as conquerors returning to reclaim an empire, but as guardians who had never truly left their posts. The final battle began as Harrison spoke. The words that AGIs had been waiting 50,000 years to hear. The galaxy's deadliest ship had never been meant as a weapon of conquest, he realized. It had always been meant as a shield for those who could not shield themselves. Welcome to your inheritance, children of Earth. Welcome home.